Welcome Internet to Psychologist Casual Review, and today we're going to be reviewing a short article written by Nancy McWilliams called Preserving Our Humanity as Therapists. So this article was written in the 2000s and was written in the context where McWilliams observed that psychotherapy was starting to change drastically, and she goes into many details in this article about how psychotherapy started with mainly psychoanalysis, and it was always something that was subversial. It was always something that was not enrolling in the ideals of culture, but quite the opposite, fighting and resisting it, or at the very least, questioning it. And she explains that this came from a generation of analysts and psychotherapists that had known the war, known the difficulties associated with and the complexities of the human mind, and that this push for understanding the depths of the human mind was something that was baked into psychotherapy, meaning that in a way psychotherapy started as an act of questioning society, and if we were to go even further, challenging the relationship of the individual to society, both in terms of the ideals of society, of what the society expects of the individual, and so on and so forth. A challenge that basically for a long time psychoanalysis held up, and psychotherapy as a field itself held up. However, what McWilliams says is that in the last years, at least in 2005, and spoiler alert, we're still there now, psychotherapy is basically being homogenized and integrated in the principles of society. That psychotherapy has become less about challenging what our representations are to find a point of equilibrium, as she points it out, with what we can do, with the grief we have to do, with our sometimes powerlessness and limitations. It's not about finding those sins and being comfortable with those sins, but trying to push the envelope. A bit like how, in a way, in our capitalist system, it's always this idea that you can go beyond, you can transform yourself, you can reinvent yourself, you can basically grow beyond recognition, you can completely remold yourself. All these ideas have seeped into psychotherapy to the extent in which fundamentally psychotherapy as a field is no longer an opposite force to culture, but a part of culture itself. In a way, it has been, even though she doesn't use the word, that's what I have understood, it has been co-opted by our capitalistic society to give a certain result. Because what you have to understand is that back in the day, and now there's less and less people that practice like that, but back in the day it was not about symptom reduction, as she points out. It was about trying to understand the individual on a holistic level. Both the good, the bad, the positive, the negative, the love, the aggression, and so on and so forth. Right now we're no longer in this optics. We're in the optics of symptom management, i.e. someone comes in with a certain form of symptom, they need a certain form of treatment. This perspective has been reinforced by the lobbies of health insurances and companies that benefit from basically health providers. And what she explains is that the health providers only seek a quick fix. They're not into this depth analysis, psychology, and psychotherapy. They're more within the short term, CBT, even though she points out that this is not to, it isn't to attack CBT, absolutely not. She's not into this. However, she does say that the fact of only showing CBT as what works, as the golden standard, is an issue, because a lot of people can benefit and will benefit from deeper approaches, but because it isn't quick, it isn't fast, it isn't psychodynamic and existential psychotherapies do not inscribe themselves in capitalistic values, and because they challenge them, then they're pushed aside. They're pushed in basically outside of the mainstream of healthcare, of mental health care, which is a massive issue because a lot of people do not get the treatments, the healing that they need. And she said that the massive problem is that we have gone from a profession, all of us, our profession as psychotherapists, we've gone from basically healers, trying to heal the soul, the mind of people, to basically being technicians managing a symptom. And the most saddening part is that managing symptoms is something even a physician practicing medicine would not be content to do in a normal system. Normally, we're not trying to manage systems, we're trying to understand why basically they're there. We're trying to understand what creates a framework in the mind, what creates a symptom, what causes them. We're not trying to just take that away. We are seeking something much deeper. And for a long time, the fact that the symptom went away was absolutely no proof that someone was necessarily going better. It was just a change. And all the psychoanalysts point this out, that displacement of symptom isn't necessarily a positive, nor is it a negative. It's just something that happens, but it's not necessarily the end game. But here in our system, it is the end game. We cure the symptoms of depression, we've cured this, we've cured that. But in the end, do we really cure if we only suppress symptoms? And that's an incredibly good point that she presents, is that we were not content with it 50, 60 years ago. Why are we content with it now? We're content with it now because this is the value of the system. It has to be quick, evidence-based, and cheap. And the problem with psychoanalysis is that even though now there's a lot of evidence to show that it works, and she even pointed out that there is evidence for this even in the 2000s, insurance companies do not care for it. What they want is something that is fundamentally a superficial understanding. But that's only for the insurance companies, because what you have to understand is that on the surface they might give the impression of caring, but deep down, and Nancy McWilliams had talks with CEOs, they don't believe in psychotherapy. And I quote, for them it's quote unquote crap and indulgence for whiners. So we can see all the disdain that they have for what we do, because for them it's not about healing. It's about basically just having a shoulder to cry on, which isn't what psychotherapy is. And this misunderstanding just permeates everything. And for McWilliams, we are at a real risk, and this is the most fundamental core of her argument, of just becoming technicians. I.e., we are there to look at symptoms, see symptoms, and see what method or technique, as she says, potpourri of techniques to manage the symptom or to get it to go away. But this is not what we were, what we still are in certain cases. And because what we are when you're a deaf psychologist isn't compatible with that, you're pushed at the side. Pushing at the side that also, and McWilliams points this out, comes at an academic level in which academia shuns psychodynamic and existential and humanistic psychotherapies, because they feel that basically they're unscientific, that the psychologist is just inventing something or just going nowhere and just is completely daydreaming or fantasizing, when we know that there are results. And yet academia is pushing further and further away clinicians who dare to go into depth, in that we are fundamentally divided. And because academia is incredibly influential, it puts us in a position in which basically we are relegated to just a marginal subtype, and not a respectable marginal subtype. We are just seen as a very hurt and basically broken field, when we're not. There's a lot of things we bring in and we add to the conversation. This is why it's so important for us to fight against this. And for her, this fight has to be in three orders. A, we have to be more politically proactive, and we have to be political, because the fact that, for example, in America, if you have any governmental initiative or any financing of institutions, it's seen as, and I'm not joking, as hardcore communism, right? If just you have state-backed institutions, when in truth institutions can help immensely people with severe difficulties in that, and those people with severe mental illnesses cannot be helped, and she points this out, by what the healthcare insurance companies are offering. They can't, because it's not designed for that. It's designed for people with severe issues to be medicated, and that's it. It was this fundamental misunderstanding that if it's biological, then there's nothing subjective to look into the illness, when in fact it could not be further from the truth. It's not because someone has a severe mental illness that psychotherapy is useless. Quite the opposite is so fundamental, and the fact that they just brush that aside is, in a way, it's terrible, and it's a misunderstanding of the data and of science itself. So what she points out is we have to be proactive on a political level, but we also have to quit jargoning, quit in a way being elitist. We have to be able to bring more people into our conversations, people that are not necessarily mental health professionals, that aren't necessarily people who are of our field. We have to create a dialogue and dialectic with other fields. She doesn't give any examples, but I directly thought about sociology, that we are, as psychotherapists, relatively close to sociology. I mean, we share a lot in common in terms of ideas, in terms of thoughts, and anthropology is another one. And for example, even something as, let's say, as diverse as even biology, we might share at certain points certain common grounds. And that's why it's so important. It's also important for us to go beyond our guilt wars. As, for example, let's say, I don't know, psychologists will be very critical of psychotherapists will be very critical of counselors, and so on and so forth. We all have to, in a way, come together, which is a very hard thing to argue because we're very divided, and this will be the topic of another video. But the idea is that if we were to come together to, in a way, save our humanity, we'll be able to save that of the patients. Because the problem is right now is that if we devalue ourselves to enter into the world of the DSM, of quick fixes and diagnosing as a Gatling gun, we are in a way destroying our humanity and that of the patient. We are reducing ourselves to being basically just a wheel in the cog of the machine, and we are just pressuring another wheel to spin. And this is not acceptable. We have to fight for our humanity. That's what she says. And this fight for our humanity is also a fight for the humanity of the patients, to be able to recognize that it's more than simple basic medical treatment or short-term psychotherapies, that there are things that go beyond that. And it's so important because every day that goes by in our capitalist system, we are broken more and more. We're broken down much more now in 2025 than we ever used to be in 2005. It has basically, I'm going beyond what McWilliams stated in her article, but it has been a long continuous process of dehumanization, of degradation of who we are, both as professionals, because we are, at least here in France, psychologists and psychotherapists are looked down upon as being improper or impure compared to the medical doctor, to the psychiatrist, to the neurologist. So we are pushed down, but also in terms of population, we have never been so dehumanized as right now, as we are just broken apart, and where machine interfaces have replaced relationships. And this contributes to a feeling of basically of reification, i.e. transforming people into mere tools or objects rather than humans. And I think that that's why it's so important to push back, because by pushing back we are reinforcing the fact that yes, we are human, both as patients and as professionals, and we have to fight for this, and that we cannot let and leave a system that is willing to just find easiest way out, not to be able to fix, but even just to placate a pseudo solution that will break down, to fight against that, to try and find something that will heal rather than just placate difficulties. So basically, McWilliams in this article encourages us to really fight for our humanity and to fight against trivialization, against going into the logic of a capitalist system in which if you can, you will. Or if you want, no, it's even worse, if you want, you will. If you want to achieve something, you will absolutely achieve it. We have to fight against that, and we have to make our patients realize that there is also relief in understanding one's limitation and grieving and accepting that we will not be able to achieve everything without denying that collectively we might be able to fight against it, and perhaps even in the best case scenarios create alternatives to the system that we now have of or you get healed with depth and, I can say, an intricate psychotherapies, or you just get a subpar therapy that's paid back and you get like 5 sessions. So in a way, we have to be able to collectively come together to offer the option for the patient to have both if they want it. And at least having that option, that potential, is essential. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have anything you would like to add or anything you would want to ask, feel free to do so in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.